Very good morning to all our dear listeners and viewers. Welcome to yet another edition or episode of ACFIM Talks. Your host, Felix Kafuma, and today we are discussing NUP and whether NUP is actually representing the interest of their voters. And with me, I'm joined by two panelists. So far, one is ready on set, and another one is yet to join. But before I introduce them, let me welcome everybody and I encourage you to be part of this conversation. You can follow the discussions on all our social media channels, on our YouTube, ACFIM Uganda, on our Twitter, ACFIM UG, and also on our Facebook page. You can be part of the conversation, send in your questions, and also your comments. Will be glad to read them. Before we start, let me introduce so far the panelist that is with us. Many of you have interacted with him. I think you've seen him on the site. For those who are readers, you've also read a couple of his articles. Is Dr. Yusuf Serunkuma, who is a PhD graduate fellow at Makerere University Institute of Social Research. He's also the founding co-director of Let Us Read, an initiative that inspires young people to read. Wow, that's quite amazing, quite amazing. He also writes in a column with the Observer newspaper, and he recently published a book, Non-Essential Humans, Says on Governance, Ruin, and Survival in COVID-19 Uganda, which was published in April 2022. Dr. Yusuf Serunkuma, you're much welcome on ACFIM Talks.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Reading my profile was nostalgic for me because Let Us Read was founded in 2010 and it died in 2012.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm delighted it's still up there. I think you checked my LinkedIn profile where it still stands. But it's a very old thing. It was part of Fountain Publisher. I was editor at Fountain Publishers, and we were trying to excite young people to read children's books because we had so many that they had not been read, you know. So when you read my profile, I'd even forgotten about it. But yeah, I'm glad we made a contribution in that way.
That was quite noble because I think the reading culture in Uganda is really still poor. So how I wish you can pick it up again and run with it. That would be very, very great. But in absentia, let me also introduce Henry. Henry has been on this set before. This could be his third time to be with us. Henry Kasacca, many of you follow this program. You've seen him before. We've been discussing, especially when we discuss parliament and multi-party politics. Is the ED or Executive Director of Dialogue and Democracy Training Center, and it was also the founding program manager of iPod, and is so grounded on issues around political parties strengthening. He has done work around political economy analysis, gender mainstreaming, and deepening democratic processes. When he joins us, I'll be able to throw him straight away deep into the conversation we are having right now. But before we start, allow me to provide what I would call a stage, set the stage. Why are we having this discussion today? If you all of you remember, or if you've been following the developments within the Uganda's politics, last week, Honorable Francis Zake was voted out by 155 MPs from the position of Commissioner of Parliament. Of course, the flamboyant Honorable Zaki was accused and apparently found guilty of insulting the Deputy Speaker Anita Among on social media. But what is of interest to this discussion is the manner in which Zaki went down in Parliament, which we found it to be a bit too uncharacteristic of National Unity Platform, the party that against which Zake represents. And remember, NUP as a party has presented itself more as a disruptive party. Even when it was campaigning, before it burst on the scene, it had cut out itself to be that party that doesn't go down without a fight. But the manner in which Honorable Zake was booted out from the position of Commissioner of Parliament then raised a number of concerns and questions that kind of provide the essence why we should be discussing whether NUP in Parliament is actually representing the interest of their voters. You remember, NUP is the leading opposition party with 57 MPs and majority coming from the central region, overwhelmingly voted for. And a year later, in Parliament, we see the fire-present character of NUP against which it promoted itself prior to elections being questioned, and especially the way it conducts business in Parliament. And this triggers our discussion in today's episode. Is NUP in Parliament representing the interest of their voters? Henry, you're most welcome. You found us when we were laying a case.
Thank you very much for having me again. And I'm sorry I'm late. I had some technical challenges, but finally I'm here.
Great. Okay, let me start with Doctor. And there have been a couple of comments I picked from, I think Doctor also made some, you alluded to a bit of questions around this area. First of all, NUP was overwhelmingly voted for in the central region. In your view, when you look at the voting patterns, what were the expectations of those people who voted NUP into Parliament?
Okay, thank you so much. I'll prefer that you call me Yusuf and not Doctor. Yusuf is my friend.
All right.
Okay, fine. Cool. First of all, to understand the central region, the idea of having a central region is that the central region interacts with the state very closely, right? So the relationship that central or urban spaces or capital cities share with the state is very close. Okay, as opposed to people who live in the countryside, who are living, whose subsistence is realized by tilling the land, the people in capital cities often interact with the state in the sense that their subsistence is earned from selling their labor, right? So they survive on the rent of labor, and in the process they earn a salary, right? And because of the different ways in which we interact with the state, especially through paying taxes, the people in urban spaces tend to see the ways in which their taxes are used very closely. I'm not meaning to say they are very politically more educated, but I'm saying the relationship they share is closer compared to people in the countryside, right? So that is Kampala, that is Wachiso, that is Mukono, and the neighboring areas, which tends to be Buganda essentially, because this is the cosmopolitan area which has often attracted people from elsewhere for its historical reasons. So this region overwhelmingly voted for NUP, right? And you got to understand that NUP starts as People Power, which was a movement, a political project, which was meant to say, we are bringing an end to the mess that this government is doing, right? It was disruptive in the sense that it even threatened the ways in which we think about electoral democracy, right? The ways in which we think about electioneering. And it picked so much fire. It promised sort of an Arab Spring uprising. And I'm not just making this up. If you read their slogans, their mottos, their packaging, red overalls, red beret, and stuff like that, right? It was very disruptive. Promised a movement which was going to unseat and destabilize the ways in which business is done in Uganda. Okay, so to the shocker of many Ugandans, including myself, People Power mutated all of a sudden into NUP, right? And I wrote in my column that was the end of People Power movement. It was that it had become a traditional political party in the sense that it's going to reproduce the many things that FDC, DP, and UP, or rather CP, UPC have gone through, okay? It was a shocker to And at that time, it was only visible to, I think, analysts and pundits. It was very unclear to supporters. But you realize hitherto very pivotal powers in people power movement were knocked off. One of them is Stella Nyanzi. Stella Nyanzi was very critical, was very central to people power movement. In fact, if you look back, Stella Nyanzi and Bobi Wine almost enjoyed the same luster as part of this movement. They enjoyed the same level of appeal, right? The differences being that, the other one is an artist and entertainer, and this one was an activist who had made his mark as an activist, challenging, among other people, the First Lady who doubled as Minister of Education in ways that we had never seen in this country, right? So Stella Nyanzi's luster was at the same level of Bobi Wine, and the team was amazing. And a couple other people who really belonged to people power movement, but had belonged to other political parties, including the NRM, FTC, and other political parties. The formation of NUP was a blow to so many. Okay, it was a blow, it was a shock at so many people. But the appeal, the excitement, the sloganeering sustained, and then they end up in Parliament, right? Now, what has happened in Parliament over in the past 1 year is that we've seen a key shift, maybe not a key shift, but a dwindling of the promise and the symbolism and the allure of people power. It's dying. Well, I thought it died at that moment of formation of the NUP. That was my position. But it sustained its life up to a certain point. If you didn't see its death during the voting of the deputy speaker, speaker and deputy speaker, it has died in the impeachment of Francis Zake. Okay, so if you ask me whether people power, rather NUP, still represents the aspirations of their people, my answer is a straight up no, right? An absolute straight up no, because if you think about NUP, say struck people power, if you can still accommodate the sort of relationship between people power and NUP, you would expect NUP to be a version of EFF, right? South African EAF. So they should be showing up. If overalls are not allowed in Parliament, they should have red suits. You remember FDC's Samji Munganda used to don red suits. If you remember that moment, right? So that's what the entire embrace of people power. So you expect them to be wearing the red berets. If they are not able to do that, they should at least be in court challenging the decision by the UPDF that red berets are gazetted symbol for the armed forces, right? So they've done neither of that, right? They've done neither of that. They don't wear their uniforms. They don't chant their slogans anymore, And also, when Bobi Wine promised so many things right from house arrest, he said he's not going to swear in. He's giving him 1 month. And then all of a sudden, his leader of opposition came up with a thing, a shocker still, called the legislative agenda, which meant he's willing to sit down and an autocrat they vote to kick out in 1 month and start negotiating, right? But if you know the history of this autocrat listens to no one, okay? It's either him or nothing. And so, surprise to every Ugandan who is expected to be understanding, our friend Matthias Mpuga, a very noble character, a noble man, a good man, decided to come up with a legislative agenda. It's a hoax. It's performative politics, right? And the danger with this sort of performative politics is that, for the ordinary people, you look like you're playing opposition, right? You look like you are actually an opposition politician because if you're suggesting things and and then you start claiming you're civil, you're very decorous, you start claiming you're a very cultured individual, you're a gentleman. Look, these folks were voted because they're wearing gold overalls. Why did they all of a sudden start wearing suits? Right? Where did the red berets go? Right? So if you ask the question whether they are still representing the aspirations of their people, no, they veered off a long time ago. In fact, I would say they're headed for utter destruction, just as what happened to the UPC.
Wow. Let me throw in here, Henry. Because the truth is, the way NUP presented itself, and in here to those who really subscribed to its the way it was engaging in opposition politics, it marketed itself as a disruptive political force that would stampede the regime out of power. As things stand, NUP seems to be more diplomatic, taking the same path other political parties in opposition. I've preferred to take. And the bigger question is, where did this disruptive fire of NUP, this character, the brazen character of NUP, where did it go? What happened?
Well, thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, and well, it's a very good question, but also it's important that we place it in the right context. One, in terms of, I'll start with the obvious one. Where has all the power gone that NUP had? I think we should look at this question in the context of our politics in the last 12 months, I would say. I think for close to 6 months, we have not had a story about a drone kidnapping people. We had so many stories about young people being abducted, arrested. This debate came to Parliament. There was no concrete resolution of that issue in terms of the political processes or the legal processes. People are not presented to court. But eventually, I think the steam was being blown out. And many people got so scared about the drones. And I'm sure that the idea that you do not see so many red berets around, it's not that they have just gone quiet. I mean, there was a time when it was extremely hostile. I mean, all the reports were about people being abducted left, right, and center. People are being kidnapped. We had lists coming to Parliament. You remember that at one point, NUP presented a list and demanded in through Parliament to have government
Henry, I seem to have lost you a bit.
of our own.
Okay. I think I'm losing Henry somewhere in between the connection. I hope he can come back and drive that point home. I think it's yes, Henry, proceed.
Okay. Yes, I'm saying that this environment that had so many stories in the media all over the place about people being abducted, they don't know where they are going, created some kind of chilling and fear factor among so many Ugandans. Even those who felt there could not be a risk of being arrested, they could all see, they look at a drone and say, drone yiyo, a drone yiyo. So even those who are not targets of any kind of politics got so scared. So one is that chilling effect had so many people fear, take off their red berets, keep them home. I mean, nobody would stop you on the road with a red beret. Even today, you can walk with your red beret. But people chose not to have their red berets on. So that is one of the factors that we saw. Secondly, is that post-election politics is quite different from election politics, and this one is seen with all the political parties. The third factor that I also want to point out is that NUP, FDC, I don't know which other party has been branded defiant. And the sense in which we discuss their defiance is that these are people who have decided to go against all the rules and they are going to stampede on anybody who is until the dictator is fallen. But if you look and listen to them carefully, their defiance is supposed to be within the legal framework. I mean, they use defiance as a way of awakening people to stand up for their rights. They do not use defiance to go against rights, to go against laws. When they use defiance, they say we are going to defy illegal orders. We are going to defy unconstitutional orders. We're not going to accept. So that element of defiance has been shaped within the legal framework. The challenge is that because of our history and having a country that is extremely charged and has some elements of violence, when you talk about defiance, everybody thinks you're going to go against the law. And this is the contrast. There are many people who felt that we had to stop him. I mean, we had all these slogans, Chigwa Lero. Chigwa Lero, literally in English, is that it ends now, either now or never, but it must end now. So Chigwa Lero was a slogan that is not really so democratic. in terms of any available options, but it's a slogan that says this is our position. We he either goes or we come in. So we had that kind of dynamics. Now, in terms of whether NUP has been representing their members, I would say yes, and I could say 100%. I mean, all this debate about people who were abducted in Parliament. I mean, if you look at the sessions of Parliament, go into the substantive discussions of Parliament, and examine to what extent have the NUP representatives represented issues that are affecting their members, that are affecting their constituencies, that are affecting their voters. I mean, many of these MPs in NUP are first timers. We should not forget that. And you know, when you get to Parliament, it takes you at least 2 years to understand how the system works, because you don't walk in and then assume that you are going to. So people have to school, people have to learn parliamentary processes, parliamentary procedures, even government processes. So in the first year of NUP, you will expect that they are not going to become the Agura Warriors, they're not going to become the Kule Parks, they're not going to become the Dombos of those times, they're not going to become the Erika Ruhangas. I have been to Parliament, I've worked with MPs who have learned through the process. By the second year, people are beginning to stabilize and know how to use Parliament and how to influence government. So in the last 1 year, many of these MPs from the National Unity Platform, if you look at the Hansard, you'll be surprised, and it will be amazing how much effort they have made to represent their constituencies. I mean, just go and look at all these questions. I mean, this is one of the tools they use. The questions of national importance, because many of them are not so grounded within the policy and oversight, and they also lack the supportive framework. They have used the available space by raising what they think concerns their constituencies. I think all MPs in NUP have stood at least once to say, in my constituency, this is happening. Now, how their submissions are taken on by government and by Parliament is another issue. But in terms of making the effort to stand up and say we represent a particular group of people, that has come up. Now, of course, the appointment of Mpuga and he's taking up as leader of opposition. And this is also another kind of context we have to understand. Even with FDC, much as they believed that they had won, first of all, is that our political system has two systems. It has a presidential system and a parliamentary system. In a parliamentary system, whoever wins the majority seats will become government. The next person will become leader of opposition. But in Uganda, unfortunately, it has not yet happened. It is possible that somebody can win the presidency and lose parliament. So we have two kind of systems running, and we have accepted these two systems. Bobi Wine could be president without a majority in parliament. That could be possible. President Museveni would be a president without majority in parliament. Now, that is the number one legal system we are in. And the idea that NUP becomes the leading opposition party is not by choice. It is by law. That because you have the highest number of people, you must provide the leader of opposition. Now, should NUP decline to perform that, it will necessitate Parliament to amend the rules. Otherwise, there is no way out. If NUP says we are not going to offer a leader of opposition, we cannot have a stalemate in the country. Parliament will convene, they look at the laws, and they can propose an amendment. Same applies to this position of a commissioner. The law says NUP will provide because they are the leading opposition party. So if NUP says we are not nominating a commissioner, having impeached Zake, and we have said no way, and we are going to have a stalemate where decisions will be challenged because of lack of quorum, it is within the mandate of Parliament to look at the rules. And I think we shall not go that far. What NUP is saying is that they are challenging the process of throwing out Zake. If court can pronounce themselves and say, yes, Zake was thrown out within the law, NUP will oblige and they will follow the law and they will nominate somebody else.
Yeah,
so
but Henry, on that one, I think the bigger debate here is the approach is how NUP is actually conducting itself to represent the people that voted it into parliament.
Right.
And I think the issue is, you could be right that they are doing all this legislation, making contributions to the floor of parliament, but those who voted NUP, they voted a party that somehow marketed itself as a party that can do. You know that Malema, opposition political leader, Malema in South Africa.
Yes.
That kind of Malema, that's the kind of NUP they wanted. So the conduct of NUP now, when they are in parliament, does it necessarily does it necessarily appeal to those who trusted NUP?
Yeah, you see, the conduct of NUP, I would say, is still appealing, and we are also making the assumption that the people who voted NUP were people who were ready to run against the entire establishment. That these are people we labeled as fed up, and they are ready to even ban the constitution if it means to have a new Uganda. They are ready to do anything. Nobody should stand in their way, not even the law. But what and you remember, I mean, there are some of these sentiments being expressed because we have radicalized many of our young people. There are many people who have been radicalized, and this is what they believe in. I have been to many political parties. I mean, let me give you an example of FDC. I was in an FDC meeting in Ginger, and people were telling General Muntu that you are so kind, you are so polite, you are so simple, and he told them that when I was your age, I never had such complaints. I got a gun and went to the bush. So if you believe you are more committed than I am, at your age, you are simply coming to a discussion to accuse your leader of being very soft. If I was at your age, I could not have time for that. I chose to go to the bush. So in other words, they have the sense that even when Dr. Besige says defiance, people believe there's a plan B. We have used plan B in the context of mobilizing people to show up, anticipating something like it.
Henry,
Yes, yes, Yusuf, I can give some way.
Yusuf, if you want to come in, please come in.
Yes,
Before
I think Henry has got all this wrong. You know, the idea of going to the bush is, we have a new bush, right? The bush has changed meaning. So hitherto in the 80s and 70s, the bush used to be an actual bush, right? Okay. In the era of neoliberal democracies, especially the last decade, the 2010, 2020 decade, was a decade of street protests. That was the new bush. If you look at the time when Museveni went to the bush and the Mugisha Muntu, the entire continent was going to the bush. Okay, we had civil wars in that entire period, right? And African politics moves and shifts. So we entered a shift of street protests as the new bush. Now the strange thing is the political players on the scene were unwilling to appreciate the new bush. And I think the young people complaining in the FDC meeting that you attended were complaining about the leadership of the.
We are losing Yusuf, and yet he's making it. Okay.
Being unable, right? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now, please. But with some background noise, but you're back.
So you look at Kizza Besiege's politics. Kizza Besiege's politics of the president appreciates that the bush is in Kampala. The bush is not in Wellington. The bush is here. And as you rightly said, the bush is catered for in the constitution of this republic. Article 23 of the Constitution of Uganda allows to use Kampala as the new bush. And I think if you contrast Kizza Besigye and Mugisha Muntu, this is why Kizza Besigye has a big asset of Mugisha Muntu. Mugisha Muntu is our politician of the future, not the present. Right? And I want to go back. I don't know if I'm allowed to eat into your time.
We are going to go for a break, and as we go for a break, you work on your background noise. There's a background noise coming from your end. We are going to go for a break. When we come back, I'll pick it up from you. But as we go for a break, drive your point home, Henry, so that we break at once.
Right. what you talked about the new bush, the bush is not the physical bush. The new bush, the new bush today is in form of an uprising, is in form of creating some kind of force that is going to go against some of these establishments. And the new bush, if you want to say that yes, people are going to the bush, is actually a covert kind of arrangement. In the real practical sense, the new bush is a covert kind of arrangement to find a way of weakening the establishment. And because of some of those elements, you would see, this government has a background of covert work, what they call special operations or special whatevers. All that is covert. And if you listen to Dr. SJ, when he left FDC to go say we need to go and organize, let us get away from this formal organization, let us organize underground, let us do the organization. Now, I don't want to assume, I don't want to confirm that NUP has been having that. But when you begin putting the pieces together, the bush is not the physical bush. The bush has been because of what measures people are putting in place, what organizing is taking place. And that will also be explained by what you see in terms of how the responses are taking place. So the point I'm trying to say is that the new bush in parliament, I mean, we had walk to work. It was also another kind of new bush. We had it's a slogan to drive something. The point I'm trying to say is that I do not want people to assume that the fact that NUP has taken up the formal political positions they have abandoned. NUP also has to have a transition. I mean, everybody goes through a transition. Before you get into government, you must maintain the support you have grown with the expectations that come with the particular portfolio. So I don't think that NUP has abandoned who they are. I think that NUP is still playing their game within the prescribed framework. And the idea, and we always get a sense that we don't expect NUP to be in parliament, we don't expect NUP to have a legislative agenda, we don't expect NUP to do this. You remember when we had the Queen coming, FDC had just we had just gone through the election, and FDC had
Henry, I'm going to cut short. We must go for a break. We are coming back on that point. Let's break a minute, then we resume the discussions. Thank you.
Hey, why are you running? That sounds so crap.
When are you leaving my house?
I think just give me 1 month. Huh? Just 1 month. I strategize and when I'm able to relocate my family.
My dear, I have given you more than enough time. So your problem is relocating your family.
No, I need to relocate them, but also, of course, more time.
That can be handled.
Time.
That should be enough to settle you down.
Anyway, thank you.
What is he doing in my home?
I own this place now. Madam, you have 3 days to vacate.
What is the meaning of this, Nathan?
I'm sorry, Beatrice. I've sold this house.
Without my consent? I'll fight this madness.
No, Beatrice, please. Beatrice, please, Beatrice. That man is very connected. He's very powerful. Please, let's not go there. Besides, he has given me a check. We can start from here. We can really start from here.
But why? Why would you do such a thing?
Beatrice, I had politics, campaigns. I need a lot of money to remain in the race.
You borrowed money from this money lender to run campaigns? Didn't I warn you from taking such a move?
We are unnecessary.
This doesn't concern you.
But I needed to save our parliamentary seat.
But you still lost. However much we invested. We are worth 5 million? Only?
Hey, Beatrice, Mana. In politics, you fall and rise. You fall and rise. You can lose an election.
So you believe you will rise again?
Yes, I can win again and become a parliamentarian and put my life back together. Would you write another one? Hey, Beatrice! Please, Beatrice! Please don't leave me.
Leaders like these are highly susceptible for political corruption and will not be service delivery oriented.
Contribute today at www.politicalfinanceafrica.org/donate.
Welcome back from the break. You're still watching ACFIM Talks, brought to you by Alliance for Finance Monitoring, the political finance watchdog. And before we went for a break, we were discussing whether NUP has abandoned its official position with the way it engages in the politics of Uganda, and whether the context within which it's operating is determining how NUP should now henceforth move forward. With me, I have Henry Kasacca, but I also have Yusuf, and we are live. I encourage each one of you to really send in your questions and comments on Facebook, on our YouTube. We are live, and also on our Twitter handle. Send in your comments and be able to answer them. Henry, as I wait for Yusuf to get back on set, you are concluding your point, so I can now bring in Yusuf here.
It's very critical to note is that much as we expect NUP to continue playing like they were not in government, or they were playing as activists, they have now assumed a formal political role. And a formal political role, not by their own choice, but by the legal framework of this country. And what the country expects them to do, even what some of us promoting democracy expect them to do, is to use this political space and roles to advance their democracy and to advance this country democratically. So there is no turning back. Of course, because of our history, and this is very important, you can't discuss Uganda's politics without placing it in the context of the history. Because of our history that has a very violent background, that even the routine political engagements are so hostile. Even when people are talking to each other, they are so hostile. I'm sure that you all followed Bobby Wine many times, calling upon his people to stay within the law, not to go against the law, to remind people that please, they're going to label us and arrest us. They're going to label us and find a way of deflating our pressure. Please stay within the limits of the law. This is a culture that we need to build. This is a culture. You cannot have one presidential candidate campaigning in Kampala, in Kawempe, and another one is in Machindi. Why? Because you fear they are likely to clash and have violence. The mere fact that you have presidential candidates campaigning in one district per day, and you cannot allow two candidates in a given district, regardless of the size of the district, one cannot be at the extreme end while the other is at the extreme end. Why? Because we fear people are likely to fight. Because when two groups meet, they will fight. So because of this history, it is also responsibility to ensure that you protect your people by not simply playing to the expectation that people expect NUP to go against, to attack a police station, get somebody to do this. That's not the way. So I think that they have still maintained. They are very committed. The activism. You do not expect a leader of opposition. Even at one point, even Dr. Wesige had to cut down on activism. So they have changed.
You've made your point. You've made your point. Yusuf, you've had Henry. Henry believes that NUP is still on course. Nothing has changed. It's still the same NUP. Let me come to you here. First of all, you are of the view that NUP changed. That the fire NUP had before seems to have been put out, and everyone is asking who extinguished NUP's fire, if I'm putting it that way. Okay, where did the disruptive fire go of NUP?
So, Henry is trying to sound like my friend Andrew Wender. Andrew Wender used to say that NUP is very violent. When you talk about activism in the fire within the law, you're not talking about attacking the police force. No, that's the vulgarized version of protest that Wender was preaching, which actually Wender rhetoric, which led to the murders of November. What partly contributed to the murders of November 2018 by portraying NUP as bent on working outside the law. This constitution we have, the 1995 constitution, allows in many different ways. If you think about simple things like wearing red suits every single day, wearing red berets every single day, challenging every single thing that government does in courts of law, causing the kind of stuff that Malema Vidizi does, the kind of thing that Isaac Simakade does, right? The kind of thing that Kakwenza is doing. Those are things that were symbolic of people power, right? Doing neither of those things. So you don't want to take it to the extreme version of saying, they're going to attack a police force. Nobody is suggesting that. All the things that Kakwenza, Simakade, Mavidizi are doing still are within the law. Even tweeting, as Isaac Francis Zake did, are within the law. They are legal, right? There are so many legal avenues of protest that NUP has reneged on, that NUP has just stopped on and abandoned, right? What's violent about wearing a red suit? What's violent about wearing a red beret? What's violent about being in court all the time on every single thing? Our kids were locked out. Our kids, young, without any single piece of science, were locked in their homes. Courts in Malawi, activists in Malawi, sued their government against lockdown. And the High Court of Malawi ruled in their favor, and there was no lockdown. What are the folks in this country doing? If you say they're promising fire and banning police stations, nobody's promising that. The Constitution has so many avenues. Bobby Wine lost so many avenues of protest. I'm writing. If you read Article 23 of the Constitution, I think Section B, I'm not I need to check it up right now. It's very clear calling for assembly and protest. When this man was locked up in his house under house arrest, right? He didn't have to go to appeal to be locked open because he was illegally detained in his house. He had to just keep him there, right? Allow the illegality to continue, right? So the extreme version of portraying people power and those in the voters who really wanted sort of disruptive forces is to portray them as advocates of violence. No, that's the extreme version. That's the Andrew Mwenda kind of speech that that calls for a vibrant response from the state and becomes justified. But it's extreme. But let's go back a bit. If you look at the profiles of the people in Parliament voted for as NUP, you need to profile them, right? Against those that they stood and kicked out. If the voters wanted debaters, if the voters wanted policy analysts, if the voters wanted meticulous accountants to go line by line and check for cases of spending of resources, if the voters wanted that caliber of people to stand on the floor and speak very good English, they would have sent those parliaments.
Maybe I just want to come in.
Most of the losers say in the key conferences.
Henry, fast hold it there.
Just a simple question. Yusuf,
far better credentialed by the successful candidates.
Yusuf,
right? Yeah.
What did the voters want?
You just read the profiles of the successful candidates.
No. What did the voters want?
That's what that's what I'm saying. Read the profiles of the successful candidates. You see a pattern.
Which profiles have you read of the successful candidates?
Oh, look. There's a guy called Nyeko who beat a very credentialed debater. There's Malende, who beat a very credentialed academic. Segrinya beat who is more educated than he was. There's a woman who stood as a councillor in Kalangala, was even voted when she didn't even campaign for a single day. They didn't even know how she looked like. Nyeko was congratulating his voters, and they were asking him, "Who are you?" They had no idea who he was.
And they had seen his profile. And they had seen his profile. They had seen his profile.
They didn't even care how
you are contradicting yourself. Yusuf, hold it. If you tell me to look at Nyeko's profile, and you're telling me they voted for him without knowing who he was, then how did Nyeko profile himself? The issue of profile had no issue.
Exactly. He profiled himself as people power. The only thing he had to do.
He had no people power. There's no profile in that.
The point Yusuf is making is...
You want to understand the profile of Malende. You want to understand the profile of Segirinya. You want me to read about their profiles and why they made it through. And you are telling me that people voted Nyeko and they didn't know who Nyeko was. Then Nyeko did not profile himself. He positioned himself when the wave that was coming.
Okay. That's a good point you've made of positioning, right?
Okay.
Positioning against a wave. A wave doesn't listen to credentials of a person. A wave can even vote for a jerrycan.
And the wave is unreliable. It cannot come back.
Okay, but let's give this discussion focus.
Right? Political project and political movement. Political movement. Let me explain.
There's no political movement in this country.
Sustained political party. They are meant to pursue a political project, and after it is successful or failed,
they are meant, but that was not what they were doing.
Yeah. Well, let me explain. We gotta go back this really quickly. They are meant to focus on a political project, and after the political project is done, they either die in success or in failure. I can guarantee people had to die. People had to die even after defeating Museveni. Even if they defeated Museveni successfully, they had to die. So it was a suicide mission for people power. You either die in victory or you die in defeat. Now they are dead in defeat.
People power was not a movement you're talking about.
Yeah, but Yusuf, just to come back to you on that one. When you say they are dead in defeat, they didn't just die. What happened? Because who has actually put out people power? Who has put people power out of action? Let me put it that way. If you say it is out of action.
You say death doesn't mean somebody has to kill you, right?
Of course, literally use it. Yes.
Look, political. So there are two things. There's a political party and the political movement, right? Political movements pursue particular political projects, and political movements, by their nature, are suicide missions.
But Yusuf, right? Yusuf.
Let me finish just an understanding.
Let him finish.
They are political movements, wherever they've been, right? Wherever they've been, political movements are a wave, as explained it, and waves are not known for being peaceful. Waves are violent. They're violent in that moment, and after that moment, so the political project for power was defined very categorically as removing a dictator. Right now, after a political project is pursued, it either succeeds or fails. Now, after it is failed, the actors have to transform themselves into something else. Right. And so what we have failed to appreciate is that the movement called people power pursued a particular political project, which was removing a dictator, for which they failed. Now they have to reform themselves and turn themselves into something else. They have turned themselves into a political party. Now, the moment they become a political party, they become like the traditional political party, FDC, DP, or UPC. And we know the fate of political parties in this country. They are in a shambolic state. They are struggling. They are internally disruptive. They're internally fragmented. That's the state of political parties, right? So the movement was the promise. The voting was based on the movement. I can guarantee you, if Bob Wine had become president, he had to govern through the movement system that Museveni came with in 1986, because he had to form coalitions of people to govern. I don't know if any Uganda has ever taken them to think about how was Bob Wine going to govern after he was successful as president. He had to remake people power into something else. He quickly did that before the election, and that was the beginning of his failure.
Yusuf, let me just say this. Let me come in on this one.
Okay, please come in.
And people power was not a movement. It was an idea that could grow into a movement. People power had not reached any movement by any standards. It was an idea that started as a wave that had the opportunity to grow into a movement, which opportunity were cut short. A movement cannot start in an elective season. People power was an election wave. They had no idea. The potential of becoming a political movement was there. The potential of remaining a wave was there. And for us to assume that people power was a movement, we are making that conclusion too soon because it did not have any elements. All these people are still coming together. You remember when
people power now?
Sorry?
What is people power now? What is people power now?
People power is an idea that has been championed by Bobby Wine, that has been championed by Dr. Besigye. The idea of mobilizing Ugandans to stand up and do what they all believe in. Dr. Besigye tried it. He had not been so successful. Bobby Wine came with his vigor and dynamism. It also got more weight. And along the way, it got lost in the election. They focused on what slogan is going to be on the ballot paper. Why we have the umbrella, and they have made this one very public. They chose the umbrella because their people are going to get confused. And we use symbols because our people have been illiterate in this country since the 60s. So the idea that this wave, which had the potential of becoming a political movement, was actually a movement, is premature. It's too early to conclude that way. It was a wave that people are still jumping on board, and along the way, they had to go for an election, they had to have candidates, they had to have processes, they instituted ad hoc processes. And ad hoc people instituted processes that were even being challenged internally, but because there was a wave, but a movement will not work like that. So don't conclude by saying people power is a movement that lost it. No. If people power had the potential of becoming a political movement, but it lost that track, it lost that opportunity because of an election and because of so many factors. So today when we say that the movement has died, it was not there in the first place. It is still an idea. It is not dead.
Henry, I'm struggling to understand the distinction between an idea and a movement, right? You're not making that very clear. Because movements are moved by ideas and political projects.
Yes.
I don't know if you can integrate in your analysis the idea of a political project, right? The idea of a project which is going to be achieved at the end of this.
Yes.
I know if you look at a country such as Pakistan, if you can call it a political idea, but it's a country which has stood its time, right? So I'm struggling to understand your theoretical understanding of political ideas, political movement. Yeah, I think you're trying to draw a distinction which is very difficult.
The theoretical understanding.
My sense of movement, is that movements are defined by projects.
Right? Yeah, movements is the project, yes.
Movement is a project. And we had a project with the people power wave. Like, I'm wondering why you insist it's an idea which never became, because they have to have an idea.
It's an idea.
But gentlemen, let's come back here. Okay, this whole, whether it's a movement or a wave, we can have that discussion until the roosters come back. But the issue is, in the current situation of where NUP is now, if you are Bobby Wine, for instance, how do you? Let me start with this, Yusuf, who really believes that somehow along the way, NUP has lost it. How, if you are Bobby Wine, how would you get out of this situation?
NUP has
practically.
So internally, it's extremely fragmented, and for obvious reasons. When people get into parliament and they start enjoying the perks, they get undue weight. They get corrupted by a lot of cash in parliament, which is flowing here and there. So he has no clout. I think when we talk now, I think Bobby Wine could have sway over maybe about 5 or 10 MPs, that's what the many numbers he has. So how do you get this out? He has to rebrand. So it's just one simple project. He has to rebrand people power, right? If he wants to sustain it. But political moments tend to be very fluid, right? So we could have new centers of power very quickly. It is not that he is the alpha and omega. He doesn't have like a grand ideology that he has to keep reproducing. He's a child of a political moment. Bob Wine gets born at that moment of political party disintegration, right? So FDC was in shambles, had just split, and UPC is almost non-existent. DP was in the middle of a major strife. So on the ruins of political parties, on the ruins of DP, FDC, people power emerged, right? And the people in Kampala, the people in the central region, who interact with the mess of the state every single day, are obsessed by one single idea. And people power was able to define that in its time. That was removing Mr. Museveni, ending autocracy. That was a major political idea around which, major political project around which people power was wound, right? And on the ruins of political parties, it emerged as a movement, mobilizing all the different players and the different political parties to come with, to coalesce efforts and achieve overthrowing an autocracy, right? And if you remember very well, in its birth, Bob Wine was such a kingmaker in the sense that he was looking for excellence, talent, quality. So he would go to Bujiri and support an FDC candidate, right? He would go to northern Uganda in Arua and support, rather in Bujiri, supported the Jema candidate. He supported an FDC candidate in the north, right? That was the kind of dream, ending an autocracy through picking the best of our pugilists to confront the autocracy and challenge it, right? So when he becomes one of the dead political parties, one of the ruinous political parties. So we have many dead political parties. We have FDC struggling, DP, which is broad in a dangerous political wrangle. We have UPC, non-existent. And then we have the NRM, which is also like properly on the verge of disintegration. The only difference that it has the guns and the money, right? So then you have NUP. So the political condition in this country is that all political parties are in a mess, right? So the wrangles you see in DP represent a political condition. The wrangles in DP are so subdued in the NRM because they are in power. They can throw money here and violence here, right? When you move to the NUP, they're struggling to hold the party together. Because one of the folks they gave a position went against one of their own. When they were voting for the deputy speaker, all of them voted for the NRM candidate. You know, that's strange. So they're struggling to keep themselves together. Same with the FDC. The FDC is now in some sort of a stalemate, doesn't have this fight because I think it's now trying to reveal itself. There's only one way out of this for Bob Wine. Just if he is to do it, he has to find ways of repackaging himself. Okay, but you know, 5 years is a lot of time in political movement. Political moments tend to be super fluid and super fast. We could have new people leading a new movement, right? You saw, I mean, the Kakwenza story was really fascinating. That after his torture, even Bobi Wine felt compelled to associate with Kakwenza Richard Wasajja. In effect, in a small moment, Kakwenza Richard Wasajja became the leader of the opposition, the de facto leader of the opposition, if you can call power to account. In effect, in that moment, even Bob Wine had to find legitimacy from associating with Richard Wasajja, right? So this is how political moments are. Today you're the kingmaker, the next day you're somebody else, unless you are able to sustain your constant effort of repackaging. So Bob Wine is in a difficult position right now. He has to repackage himself to be seen as representing the ideals of the people in Kampala, whose political project is only one in the moment, which is ending the autocracy, right? This is why if even he put that a jerrycan, that jerrycan is my candidate, it was voted, right? Even candidates who pulled out after nomination day, but their names remained on the ballot, even if they didn't debate campaign for a single day, they were voted by overwhelming majorities. Right? If you vote for a candidate who didn't even campaign, overwhelmingly, it tells you something. It doesn't matter who that person is. All we want from them is if they can stand up. And this is the thing that some of us have been saying all the time. Vote me for anybody, even if they can sleep the entire time but wake up and vote. They can sleep for the entire time but wake up and commit violence. Okay, so this is the political condition in which we operate. Now, the problem for me is political players trying to assume we are under, say, UK political dispensation, right? Where you have Labour and Democrats, where you have Labour and the Tories, and then they can sit at a table, discuss and agree, right? If you saw under COVID-19, even the ministers of Mr. Museveni were not consulted. The trade minister, Amelia Chambede, would come to listen to Museveni's address. This is the Minister of Trade and Industry. Would come to listen to Museveni's address, not knowing what the man is going to say about his ministry. And then you have my friend Matthias Impuga thinking this is the man you can sit down and write a paper and give him and he can adopt it. No. No, it's
Okay.
like the Obama news today. The man doesn't listen to his ministers, and you think you listen to leader of opposition.
All right.
You know,
Henry, let me. Okay, I'm
Yes.
seeing you disagreeing. Let me give you your chance here now to come in.
yeah, you see, a couple of things:
Mm.
an idea, a wave, and a movement. We use them interchangeably depending on where we are in our arguments, and we get lost. We had a time when we had the late Haj Sebagala. It took us more than 12 hours to leave Entebbe to Kisasi. That was the time when Haji was Haji. We had the slogan of Haji Alagide. When Sebagala was thrown off the ballot paper, Haji Nalagida, people went for Dr. Besigye. We had a time when Dr. Besigye was everything. What he went through was because of what he had been able to inspire in Ugandans. So, if Bobi Wine has been able to come and be the one of the moment, you see, a movement does not live in a moment. A movement is eternity. In UID had the slogan, "The struggle is our life." It is not in a moment that Bobi Wine grab your moment. It is now. If you don't grab it now, you lose it. The support, the wave that people have been showing, they showed Sebagala in 1998. I was in Makerere. They showed Dr. Besigye for the last 20 years. They have shown Bobi Wine. There are people who voted for Bobi Wine saying, "Katuwe kumwana omuto, Besigye agezezaako, katulete kumuki." The idea has been around. It is the person at the right moment to appear at that time. It has never been a movement. That is why it ends up this way. The other issue is that when you talk about tweeting, going for litigation, going to do this, I have personally told FDC, if the Right Honorable Mbabazi had not gone to court in 2016, we would not have a judgment that would compel the Attorney General to present to court a progress update on the reforms. So you use litigation as part of the advocacy. You continue through all the available means. There are people in the opposition who have told me, "Henry, the courts cannot remove a dictator," who have told me Parliament cannot. I talked to MPs who tell me Parliament cannot do anything. We are just in Parliament, we cannot change anything. And I have also told them, Yusuf has also said, use the available platform to do the activism. Let the people expose what you call the dictator.
To
So
weaken
if
the
Mpuga is the leader of opposition, if Mpuga is the leader of opposition, Mpuga is well aware what can go through Parliament. And don't assume, and we also make a very big assumption that the people in the NRM are all dead. There are things that start within the opposition that create opinion within the NRM. And sometimes the NRM may change a course, not because of pressure, but because this issue has begun influencing internal opinion internally. So the space that you see people using now, when somebody is leader of opposition, it does not mean they are going to engage in discussions and winning over and what have you. No, this is a struggle. Use the available space to expose what you call the dictator. Use this opportunity to expose the nakedness of the dictatorship. When Dr. Besigye started Walk to Work, and I want to use your very examples, when Dr. Besigye started, and the violence that was meted on Dr. Besigye, nobody could believe it. We have seen these photos of people being tortured, this man from Kasese and Kakweza. Even the NRM people have been saying, not in our name. This is not what we stand for. Now, if you expose these elements, you further the struggle for democracy. But you don't have to assume that you have to abandon all this space because you want to show and the other thing I want to caution and also advise and bring to your attention. I work with political parties, and let me share this example. In before the last election, we were in Arua. There was an FDC meeting which I was going to facilitate, and the hotel locked out everybody. They told us the police had not cleared. Kasacca Wadri called IGP Kale Kaihura in my presence and told him our meeting is being frustrated. And Kaihura told him, no, Kadri, we are going to work on that. Somebody's going to get back to you. Within the next 1 hour, we had a clearance letter on WhatsApp. So when you talk about people going to do activism, think about the way people are using their offices and power. There is too much violation of the enshrined rights already. So don't assume that people will be reckless and take people to a demonstration when they are going to be destroyed. It will not serve anything. Julius Nyerere said that if politics is about anything, it should be about protecting life. So when you realize the situation is not favorable to protect your lives, please don't think that people are just going to walk naked and walk in. For the last couple of months, we have not had anybody being abducted. People have been abducted. The others have been released.
So Henry, you are saying that NUP is being tactical on this one. It is just
NUP is being realistic to the realities. Number one. Number two, NUP has not slow track. NUP is not struggling to come together, to hold together. No, NUP is just coming together. I mean, people who are coming together cannot be struggling to hold themselves together. NUP has people who have walked in from all sorts of life. They are yet to have an internal cohesion. Now in that process of defining the cohesion, you cannot accuse them of falling up.
Just hold it there on that one, because there's a question that came in, and there have been arguments that probably there are people who cross from other parties to NUP to take advantage of the wave.
Possible.
But they didn't necessarily carry the spirit and the character of NUP.
Yes.
So could that be the problem that presents NUP with what I would call a dual personality?
You see, when you begin dating a girl, you can ask her for coffee. She accepts. When she comes to the coffee, it does not mean she's going to marry you. You'll have coffee, you'll have visiting, you'll have this, and at one point you'll say, I think I should stay with this man. So when people have crossed over, some came with their expectations. Others were simply looking at the election. Others thought maybe they had no space within their own political parties, and they need to get into NUP and understand NUP. So it is incumbent upon NUP to ensure that all those people who have just come in, don't assume they are all totally converted. Some were running away from fire, others from rain, others from beatings, and there must be a process internally to ensure that these guys fully commit. You can cohabit with a woman and a man and eventually don't get married, because when you cohabitate, you realize that maybe this man is even a witch doctor or a night dancer. I'd rather go back to my old ex and I call my ex again. So what you are seeing today, what we are seeing now, and this is why I want to tell you that all these processes had the potential of generating and leading us into a movement. How it is being steered, the steering is very critical. The role of uniting the opposition is very critical. Whatever role you play is very critical. I mean, the dynamics that we are now seeing, the parties attacking each other, is because of leadership challenges. Who is steering the boat? So we must be able to appreciate the realities under which these parties are operating. Number two, let us not rush to conclude that people power had become a movement. This pressure has been here since the days of Haji Sevagala. It has just been one moment to the other. There are people I know who said, we are going for Bobi Wine, onomana kati yalika masanyalaze agakuba. The moment they realize that masanyalaze gamuvuddeko, they will go somewhere else. So it is, if you are living in a moment, people who have led movements have not lived in moments. That's why they can die and the movement will continue. So the issue is that we distinguish a wave. And I want to maintain that in this country, for the last 16 years, we have had a waves. A wave comes at a given moment. If it finds you on the right side, you sweep in. Mubarak Munyagwa won overwhelmingly in Kawempe. In the last election, he has lost totally, 90%. He lost. People voted for him because they had the key. I met a councillor in Guru who, after nomination, lacked money to make posters and he went out of the campaigns. He didn't notify the Electoral Commission. But when people were voting for the key, the man was voted. He was in a bar somewhere, they called him that you are winning. He had never campaigned even one single day. So you cannot tell me that that person is part of the movement. It is just a wave that at that material time, he had the key. Now, the symbol now was the umbrella. Now, if we can move in that manner, the umbrella may not make sense in the next 5 years. It could be another symbol of somebody who has the electricity.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Henry. We are past the hour. I'll borrow another extra 5 minutes to bring this to a close. Let me come to you, Yusuf. You've had Henry, but some have argued that probably NUP, is it probably NUP punched above its weight? That the expectations are immense on it. You see the promise that we are removing the dictator, Chibwera Ntebe Muntebe, it created immense expectations that probably NUP promised what it couldn't deliver. It could not be suffering from its over-promising.
Now, no, it didn't promise anything above its weight. It should be commended for what it did. And it did what it did and it ended. And people power died, right? We are now struggling over its burial, whether it should be kept on life support or not. And I think that's the problem we have now. People power in its time did what it had to do. And it did it in the time allotted to it, and it finished, right? So what we are witnessing now is the struggle to find a new way, to use Kasacca's word, to find a new way, a new leadership, a new mobility. And that's what movements are, right? If you go back in this country, what Henry is calling a wave, and the idea of a movement that people come together, define a political project, and pursue it. And once that project is either successful or failed, the people disintegrate, they could repackage themselves, or other new people can come in. So we have a persistent political project in this country that is ending an autocracy, right? It's a political project at the heart of so many people. And we have had political players and political projects emerge, political movements emerge to promising to end it, and they fail. And then a new player emerges. If you could take from Kasacca's examples, I mean, from Hajina Santege Salagala, and you come to Kizza Besigye. And Kizza Besigye should be credited as the most, prolific political player on the Ugandan scene, because he's so attuned to constantly repackaging himself and resurfacing as something else. And that's something he has wonderfully done, right? Right now, I think he's lost a bit of steam, but he's still so good at repackaging himself into a new life on one single political project. So we still have our political question. When does Museveni autocracy come to an end, and how is it going to come to an end? Every person in the center of this country who constantly interact with the mess that Museveni's government is, have this at the back of their mind. They are struggling to find ways of ending this autocracy, right? And whoever will ably package themselves as able to do it in this moment, they will support them. Now, when Museveni beats them hands down, the people are cool and they start to find new avenues, new ways of defining themselves so that they can continue on the same political project, right? Right now, 3 years ago, Bobby Wine emerged, maybe more, 5 years ago. Bobby Wine emerged as the promise, the guy who can mobilize a movement, redefine this political project, and persuade us on how to end it, to achieve it. And I remember I said plenty of times, it ends in 2011. That either there's victory or defeat, but it will end. There's victory or defeat in 2011, 2021, and it ended in defeat, right? He didn't punch above his weight. He made a contribution in that political moment, in the discursive space that he had, mobilizing and calling people to go pick their voters' cards, pick their IDs, be conscientized to see themselves as their moment is now. Be the ones leading the movement. He played a major role in that moment. He played a major role. Right now, we are still wondering, should he continue or not? The movement is dead completely, but we're still struggling because, the attachment remains. You can see Henry here, it is confusing. He sounds like he knows people power so well. He also sounds so distant from it. Right? He sounds like he's so close to NUP, but when you listen to him closely, like he sounds so distant from it. Right? He says some of the common things you find people on the street who relate with people power know. Insiders know much more. I've spoken to insiders, they know much more, but Henry sounds like he's into the deep circles of NUP, but then when you listen to him, he's so distant, right? So it's confusing to me how to think about Henry's submissions, especially on the idea that the movement is forming. I think Henry has a dream that at some point there will be a movement. There's a point where the movement will be fully formed. Now, that, me as a scholar of political movements, I don't know whether that ever happened, right? Political projects can stay. By the time when, at some time, they are forming, then a movement will be fully formed. No, that's not there. It never happened.
No, you see,
It's
Yusuf.
a constant renewal. It's a constant renewal. Right?
Yusuf,
and I say what I'm saying, not as a
you
political
get
player.
lost in your
Right?
theory.
Just
You get lost in the theory. You are misusing the concepts, and you assume that a dictatorship is going to end on a given date.
Gentlemen.
What I'm telling you is that to qualify a process, to qualify this wave to turn into, to label it a movement, as a scholar of movements, I think what you should do, you should write a paper using your theories of a political movement, and then begin looking at these processes that have to take place. Yusuf, as a scholar of political movements, what I expect is, I don't expect a scholar to conclude on a wave to call it a movement. Then I don't understand how to use the concepts. Because what I'm saying is that if you say the movement is dead,
Felix,
if the movement is dead, I've given you a historical perspective. From the times of Haji Sebagala, we have had Dr. Besige. You have credited him for holding it up to this time. You are now saying it is dead. So is Serunkuma going to, you cannot give birth to, something can't die before it is born. Whatever the processes we saw had the potential of driving this country into a movement. And that movement would begin dismantling what you call a dictatorship, step by step. Building a dictatorship is not a one-day event. What you call a dictatorship is beyond one person. So you must be able to build a movement that will have a thinking that will move in that direction. So when you begin labeling, you see this Arab Spring wave thinking that a wave can come and sweep and change the dynamics. What has happened elsewhere is what you're trying to think is a movement. It is not. I want to tell you that a wave is not a political movement. And for you to say people power movement is dead, I say it is not. The idea that people have always had and still stand together for a particular Uganda they want is still alive. It is not dead. And you have to be alive to the realities under which it metamorphoses.
All right. Very interesting perspectives. Movement, wave, and where we are as a country. Two interesting gentlemen here disagreeing, but the concept is here that whether NUP is at the helm of the movement or at the helm of the wave, the issue is what we're discussing, not to lose point, is whether this party that is in parliament is still appealing and representing the interest of their voters. As we come to the end of this discussion, I'm going to allow each one of you parting shots so that we can carry this discussion forward on social media. Very interesting. Let me start with you, Henry, your parting shots.
Well, my parting shot is that we are in a process of building political processes, deepening and building institutions. Many of our institutions are struggling to live up to expectations. We are judging them too soon. You think that after 1 year we can judge and say you have failed. Politics does not change like that. I think that we should move away from living in moments if you are to build this country. We must be able to have a long-term kind of thinking in whatever we do. Politicians who come and live within moments lose it immediately after the first plug. I also think that many people are still trying to comment on all these processes, but they are very far and very distant. To use Serunkuma's words, they are commenting and they are very distant, and they are not coming to the realities. They look at the theory so far, and in Uganda it's a bit different. I think we need to invest more in understanding what exactly is going on before we conclude. Even the donors have made mistakes in this country in terms of supporting our democracy. So the politicians, the donors, the voters, it is a big process, and we should use all available means. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yusuf, your parting shots.
I don't know. It remains one of my very difficult questions. Every time I'm asked for parting shots, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I have no parting shot. I think this is an ongoing conversation. Henry and I have this country at heart, and I think we think we deserve better in the ways in which it's governed. And I think we're disagreeing on methodology and how it should be achieved, right? And Henry there leads an organization which markets itself as democratic. Like you're the ED of Dialogue and Democracy, is it?
Correct.
And my problem with all democracy enthusiasts and activists is that there's a mismatch on how to operate under an autocracy when you champion democracy. Right, the political terrain is pretty autocratic, and you remain as civil as possibly could in championing democratic means, right? And I tend to think strongly that the language of democracy is the ways in which our control reproduces itself, the ways in which possible colonial comprador, such as Mr. Mussolini, reproduces himself, and also the ways in which our former colonizers continue to steal our roots through the language of democracy. We live under a clear-cut autocracy, and I think all democracy activists need to, consider strongly how do you pursue democratic ideals under a clear-cut autocracy, which, interestingly, reproduces itself through the technocracy of democracy, right? An autocracy which is elected 5 times. So when he said to Al Jazeera, that, what type of dictator is me? A dictator voted 5 times? So if you live under an autocracy that is expert-driven, under a technocratic autocracy, which has so ably managed to reproduce itself through the avenues funded and sponsored by democracy, that's a different autocracy. And our thinking has to be attuned to the ways in which modern autocracy reproduce itself. Thank you so much.
Wow, very interesting discussions. I'm being encouraged to let this show run, but no, we were supposed to be here for an hour. I've borrowed 20 minutes. We can carry this conversation on our social media platforms. Probably we'll have part 2 of it, but I was joined. It's been wonderful to have the discussion with you, Henry Kasacca, who is the Executive Director of Dialogue and Democracy Training Center. I also had with me Yusuf Serunkuma, who is a scholar and a PhD graduate fellow at Makerere University Institute of Social Research. We've been discussing NUP.
Felix, a quick one.
Yes.
I have a book which is going to be out in the next 3 months. Oh, there's a book coming out this week, but there's a book specific discussion called An Autocracy of Experts. It will be in the bookstores in the next device. An Autocracy of Experts.
We'll look forward to that.
Yeah, so.
Sure, we look forward to that one. I grab a copy of it. Yeah. So and I myself, Felix Kafuma, was moderating today's very interesting discussion. Till next week. Bye bye. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.